First of all, thank you all for coming out to celebrate AdHouse Books and the man behind AdHouse Books, Chris Pitzer. He has been publishing as... Hey, we're not getting
You're crying.
As the publisher of AdHouse Books, he has been publishing for 20 years, 100 books, countless number of cartoonists, including some of the anthologies that featured tens of cartoonists. He's drawn from talent outside of the comics industry. One of the things that I think distinguishes AdHouse Books from traditional comics publishers is that he did bring in some new voices to the comics medium and to the comic shops and the libraries that feature comics and graphic novels. He has won awards both in comics like Ignatz, Harvey's, and Eisner's, as well as the design world, AIGA, Communication Arts, Domtar Paper.
Yeah, that was Telstar.
Okay, very nice. And it's basically, those are the qualities that have combined to make AdHouse a very distinguished, unique publisher in the world of comics for 20 years. And sadly, we are here to celebrate those 20 years as Chris has decided to close down AdHouse Books and move on to other, I'm sure, creative endeavors that we will be following excitedly. But thank you very much for your service to comics, Chris. And I thought we would start this panel by talking about what does a publisher do? So many of these panels often feature artists and writers, but not necessarily the publisher. And so it may be a little bit of a mystery to everyone. Can you talk about the process of bringing a book to us as readers and fans?
Sure thing. I mean, the easy answer is the publisher does whatever the creator does not want to do. So typically that means dealing with design, dealing with printers, dealing with solicitation, dealing with stores, dealing with everything to get that vision from the creator to the customer, the fan. And so, yeah, I mean, all those things. Getting quotes, figuring out price point, picking paper with the creator. You know, you're always having communication back and forth. But all the dirty work, I would say, quote unquote.
The stuff that's not happening at the drawing table.
Exactly, yeah. The stuff that happens on the spreadsheets, via emails.
As a publisher, how do you find these cartoonists that you work with?
You know, Jim, it's everyone is different.
I know,
none of them are the same. It's every creator is a different person, and so it's a joy to work with some and a drudgery to work with others, and you figure that out. And you know, it's
name names.
Name names. We'll get there. Settle down. But it all varies. It's all good.
So you've been doing this for 20 years,
Yep.
and you know you've also been it's been public that this was your last year, and I've seen some of these panels where you talk about your beginnings with Pulpitoon Pilgrimage, Joel Pretty's book. I wondered if you could talk about what your plan was once you start publishing. You know, you start out with Joel Pretty's book and helping him find a publisher. Ultimately, that publisher becomes you and AdHouse Books. Once you publish his book, what's in your head in terms of your plans and where you go from there?
I wish I could say I had a 5-year plan or some idea, but honestly, you know, we went to SPX with Pulpitoon, we debuted it, it won the Ignatz Award, we got on people's radar, and I think because of that little bit of spotlight, creators would then pitch us. For instance, Scott Mills would then hit us with My Own Little Empire?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't know the name of the book. Sorry, Scott. But then, but in the back of my mind, I wanted to do an anthology. I love anthologies. I worked on the SPX anthology. I would help Jeff Mason at Alternative Comics with at least one of his anthologies. So I always wanted to do an anthology. So in the back of my mind was Project Telstar. So that's when I started looking at cartoonists I loved and see who might be into working with me on that and going from there. And as some may or may not know, 3 is a magic number. So that's why I did 3 anthologies. And I was somewhat biographical in that regard. The first one is Space and Robots, which is me as a kid. The second one was Superheroes, which is me as a teen. And then we all grow up and find love. And that's what the third was, romantic. So.
I wonder about your background, you know, what leads you to publishing. And I guess what I'm asking is publishers that influenced you, but also some of your professional experience in comics leading up to a skill set that allowed you to be successful as a publisher?
I love book design. I mean, that kind of, yeah, Pulpitoon should be published. And I was there for that. I have no problem with that. I asked Joel if he was cool with that. But I love book design, and I was a little tired of doing book design for other publishers without getting paid. It was like, I don't know, you're helping somebody out, but it's your profession, but you're doing it for free. So part of it was, if I start a company where I do the book design, I'm kind of paying myself in those possible profits. But I'd be surprised if a fan grows up saying, I want to be a publisher, unless they've done their history and they know how Gary Groth did his thing and other people have done theirs. But like influences, Tom Spurgeon once compared us to Black Eye, and I loved that line of comics. I mean, they were an influence. Obviously, Fantagraphics has done wonderful things.
Something that separates you from a lot of the, let's say, Fantagraphics, but a lot of publishers, is you're one person.
Right.
And you're one person who I think the entire time was working full-time outside of the AdHouse publishing part of your business. A lot of people, I think, are surprised to learn that.
And we put the curtain up, too. It's like when I send out press releases, I say we. If something gets screwed up, I blame it on the shipping department. You do those things, but I did have a day job. I did take out 2 mortgages on 2 different projects to fund. Pre-kickstarting, you kids. That's how you got stuff published.
What were the projects?
I have to feel like maybe one of the anthologies and possibly a James Jean book. And with the James Jean, you're like, yeah, we're going to make the money back. And it probably wasn't the first one. It might have been the second one.
That's something I had not heard before.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Second mortgage, it's scary, right? You have to believe in yourself to do something like that.
Hey, it's the reason that I would work with publishers. And full disclosure, Chris is the publisher that I've worked with the most in my career. He's done, I think five of my books, 5 or 6 projects together over the years. And one of the reasons is so I wouldn't have to take out a mortgage to self-publish those. But Chris, I've often said that you're my greatest creative collaborator. Did you feel that way with most of the cartoonists that you were publishing? Did you think, as a book designer, as a publisher, that there is creative, your voice is in the books that you publish? Can you talk about that, your voice as a publisher?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, I would say almost every project there is collaboration to varying degrees. The joke I've been telling, mostly this weekend is Max Huffman's book, Cover Not Final. I met Max at Zine Machine in Raleigh, Durham, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And I did this thing where I walked in, I was like, pretty impressed with his comics. And I was like, how much for one of everything? I'd never done that before, so it's kind of fun to do. And it's a zine show, it can't be too bad. And I kind of also want to put him on the spot to say, make him think, okay, what should I charge him here? You could see the wheels turning. So 10 minutes later, because I got $40, I was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. But anyway, so Max pitched it. And it's not really a pitch, it's more, I just wanted to show this to you, see what you think. And I get it, and the cover says Cover Not Final. And I read it, I laughed out loud 3 times, and I was like, I'll publish it if we call it Cover Not Final. Because I was like, I don't think there's been any book called Cover Not Final. And being in the production, design end, that's like lingo. It's like FPO, things like that. And I was like, let's do it. And he's like, yeah, okay, sure, why not? So, that's a weird collaboration, but it's one of my more favorite ones recently.
Yeah, and that'll segue nicely into some questions I have about working with cartoonists. But I do want to point out, one of the things that I've come across the last couple of years is this idea of whenever you're in a creative field, trying to show people something they haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that, as a publisher with 20 years experience, whenever Cover Not Final shows up, you recognize that. You recognize I have not seen this on a book, and there's value in that. It's something new, it's something different, it's a way to stand out in front of people.
And also it's like a chance to do, like you said, something new. And it's like, have I done this yet? No. And so, can we do it? Like with Sterling Hunley, we had those inserts in there that were not the same size paper. I'm trying to remember. Did we ever do Rough Front? I mean, I don't think I said we. I don't think AdHouse has ever done Rough Front, which is the, not the spine, the other edge, and it's all deckled and edgy. Because I don't know, maybe I did. I'm not recalling it, but I would have liked to have done Rough Front. We did color blocking, which is when you have color on the edges, all around the edges. So we did that with The Oven, Sophie Goldstein's book. It made sense because it's a tale about a world with two suns. So the cover's orange, the sides are orange, everything is orange. You're dealing with two suns. But yeah, I love those opportunities to create something new. And we did digital comics for a bit, and I guess you can do newness with digital comics. I like the published book as an art object, so that was part of it too.
That's an outlet of your expression,
Right.
What you like coming through in the way you approach publishing.
If I don't like it, why am I spending this time, this money, this energy to do anything?
Do you think that kind of creative freedom is a result of having a day job and not making publishing what you're relying on to pay back that second
No,
mortgage?
it is. I mean, my contract was one page. Because if I could not trust the person I was dealing with and they couldn't trust me, why are we doing this? I did not want to take advantage of the creator and tie up rights for possible movie options. If I was relying on that money, yeah, I might have to do that. I didn't want to be that publisher. Picture Box is a great publisher. I don't know why I thought of them.
I also
They don't tie up movie
Picture Box.
rights. I don't know why they popped into my head. But
Well, that's interesting. It goes back to this idea of other publishers and how you defined yourself as a publisher, your mission statement, your values as a publisher. Is that something that you would talk to other publishers about? Is that part of your experience in the comics industry, that publishers would converse about these things?
definitely, especially in the beginning too, when I had questions because I was not a publisher, I would talk to Jeff Mason. I would talk to Ted Adams, who I worked with at Eclipse Comics. Yeah, and then, even this weekend, we're still gabbing about things, with Eric Reynolds or Gary Groth. And I mean, it's a clubhouse of sorts. You don't reveal all your cards, but
What secrets have you been holding back from me, Chris?
I don't know.
So I want to get back to the cartoonists, because I know there are a lot of makers that certainly follow publishers in a way because they're trying to figure out, how do I get a publishing deal? Is there anything over the years that you have identified with cartoonists that say, make a cartoonist ready to be published, or make them stand out, or common mistakes that you see with cartoonists?
I think, I don't mean to be simple, but you have to believe in yourself. You have to create what you believe in. You have to be able to show that creation to someone to make that decision to publish it. And so by that, I'm saying I don't need to see an outline. I don't need to see character development. And I hate to say it, but I need to see the comic. Because if you don't believe in yourself, why would I believe in you? And as a small press publisher, that's kind of the way I've always approached it. And if you can build that track record of either building an audience online or going to a show, like Max was going to a show and getting his name and work out there, that's like doing your push-ups. So I guess, does that answer the question as to what a cartoonist should be doing to get published by a publisher?
I'm not a publisher. I don't know. But I know that I met you by doing what you described.
Right.
I was doing shows. I knew you for a couple of years from, kind of the show circuit before we started working together. So I guess you were eyeballing my push-ups.
I was. So Jim did this baller move where it was for its first published work was with Project Superior. And if you're not familiar with the book, it was broken into signatures to save money. So black and red, black and blue, full color. And editorially, I had to put each creator into what section I thought they should be in. And Jim was in one of the two color sections.
I was new.
Yeah, he was new. He was still doing his
A
push-ups.
little bit lower budget for me.
And so he had done the comic, and he was like, before I convert this to two color, because it needs to be full color before I can convert it to color, can I show it to you? And I was like, sure, go ahead and send it to me. He sends it to me, of course. I'm like, okay, you're going into the full color section now. You've moved up in the world. And I thought it was smart on his part. But was that all BS, by the way?
No. It was done in color. It was done in color. I was publishing some of those comics in black and white, and I would build them in color first.
Okay.
But,
I think you would do that, but I wasn't sure.
This is how a publisher steals talent. See, my other publisher was doing it in black and white and not giving me the color. So, Chris, I do want this to be a little bit of a greatest hits and celebration tour for AdHouse Books. And to start that off, I wonder if you think about the legacy of AdHouse Books and what that legacy is.
I mean, I feel like I hope there is a legacy. I hope, many years from now, people still remember AdHouse. We, at the time when we started, I felt like we were, bringing design a little bit more into the vocabulary, and people talked about that. But I mean, now there are so many good designers within all aspects of the industry that it's not really the case anymore. I mean, we still do nice books, but I feel the design playing field is more level now. But I honestly don't know what the legacy would be. I mean, I wish I had an answer for you, but I mean, boutique publishing juggernaut.
That's right.
I mean, Joel Pretty helped come up with that, and I always thought it felt right. And yeah,
I think that design is certainly a part. Whenever design improves across an industry or an art form like comics, and like we've seen in the last 20 years, I'm not sure you can point to one source. But I think of you certainly as contributing to that rising tide of improved design, along with some others like a Jacob Covey or a Picture Box. I think we're all, existed at the same time frame as you, and all helped build, improvements to the design and the look of comics. What's one of your proudest, or a couple of your proudest accomplishments as publisher of AdHouse Books? Any favorite books?
Well,
or
I mean,
experiments?
I think when we were at SPX, Paul Pope came up, and it's because it was so much work to get that book done. And with Paul Pope, you're never sure if the book will get done. And so the fact that, it was the book that took the longest to get done. We missed our deadlines by years.
Okay.
But the fact that it came out, and yeah, there were a few mistakes in there, but that book is actually pretty good. It's like, I'll buy them whenever I can find them for cheap, just to bring to a show so a new customer can find it. And I found one, a couple years back. I took it to a show, and I was like flipping through, and I was like, this is a good book. And especially when you read, because it's a cartoonist book, so you want to look at the pictures. But you read his essays, and it's like, they're good. And I hope more people read his essays. So, I mean, that was probably the biggest challenge. And, we did announce books and other things that never happened. I can't think of other things that I obviously am super proud. I mean, Aphrodisiac.
That's the one we were fishing for.
Yeah, there we go. That book won, AIGA, American Institute of Graphic Arts, used to have a competition, the 50 best covers, the 50 best designed books of the year, from anyone who submits. So within that year, anyone who submits a book is considered. And Aphrodisiac, which was designed by Jim Rugg, won best book design that year. I mean, most people don't know what we're talking about. That's a big thing, Jim Rugg. You got a medal. They wouldn't give out. I faked a medal and gave it to him at Baltimore.
I feel like we kind of co-designed that book.
No, I mean, the only thing we had back and forth on the cover, And, retailers hate us because there's no type on the cover, but I love it.
It was mentioned in, they do a book publication for the 50/50, and the no title on the cover was praised in their description of that book design.
Do you remember who said that?
I don't remember. Yeah, it's been a while since I've looked through there, but yeah, it is funny.
I love that you know that.
The critical feedback on that. Yeah. It goes both ways. Yeah. We touched on this a little bit, Chris, in terms of legacy and design. But 20 years is a long time in any business, and a lot of changes have happened over those past 20 years since you were actively publishing. What changes stand out to you? How have things changed since you began publishing 20 years ago in comics?
I mean, the easy answer is technology. And if you just look at like the printing industry, back in the day, you would get proofs back to review. You used to be able to you could send art. I don't think I ever actually sent art. I probably scanned art. But you would send art, and that would be scanned by the printer, or they would take your native files and output using Quark Express or InDesign. And now, you probably know, they only want PDF files. So all the work is going back on the publisher and the creator. So that's the first thing that pops to mind in regards to how the industry has changed. But then you get into things like Kickstarter. I mean, that's a huge game changer. It was the new direct market. It was, creator to consumer, no middle person. My PowerPoint's over.
Oh, well, I guess
How are we
that
doing on time?
concludes
Oh, we
our-
still got time. Yeah. No. What other technology? I mean, print on demand looks fantastic now. At first, it came out and you could tell it was print on demand, and now it's like, is this print on demand? And you're not sure. So it's gotten a lot better.
Have these changes contributed to your decision to fold up shop?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in that quick answer I just gave. It's part of it. It's, many factors into the decision, but I never really did a Kickstarter. And I know you did, and I think you needed to get the job done. But I never did a Kickstarter, and I felt like if I wanted to continue, to publish, I would have to Kickstarter. And it's just not my scene. I'm old, and I just felt like, let the kids do it.
Not that old. I'm going to ask you about
It's
future
not
plans.
It's not that old, but I don't know. You go to these shows and you see these, really talented kids putting stuff out, and it's like, you should have the table space. What am I doing here? I hurt at the end of the show. My back aches.
We don't want to hear that.
Wah.
Did you always see this as something that would be not something that you would do forever? Was it always in your mind some kind of like, I'm going to publish for a few years and...
I mean, I guess when you think about the future, I might have thought I would have continued to publish in that, what do you do when you retire? And you're like, well, you could still make books. But that said, as I've mentioned, I like my numbers. And when 20 years and 100 books came up, I was like, writing's on the wall, let's close shop. And I've always joked about closing shop. Like after that sweaty Comic-Con, it's like, why am I doing this? And, I'd make the joke to Josh Cotter, I'm turning the lights off.
Yes.
I'll let you know I'm turning the lights off. And, but what was your question?
Well, asking, where I'm leading is I'm curious about if you have plans to continue to be a part of comics and what those plans look like.
Definitely. I have a huge personal collection, so I feel like at some point I need to start doing something with that. I mean, we have the AdHouse archive, so I need to decide on that. But there are projects that, the John Fantuccio book, I want to make that happen. And if I'm not publishing it, I'll do anything else to make it happen. I'll scan it, I'll design it, I'll write it if I have to. But I want that to be out there. He was a fantastic artist.
Tell us about him. I don't know if everybody...
I guess 10 years ago I got into fandom, which is a little hard to get into because not that many fanzines were created. So you either find them or you don't. And most of them are expensive because of the rarity. But anyway, all that said, in my backyard of Northern Virginia, Gary Groth was creating fanzines, and one of the people he worked with was the talented John Fantuccio. And if you open up, he was a hot commodity in the day. People wanted him in their fanzines. And he has a very distinct style, a beautiful signature. And he lived he lived across the town from Gary. So I was telling Gary, he did a photo essay on John and his wife and went to their house and took pictures. And I was like, I love that. And so John worked for the CIA as a day job. He would teach art lessons, to art students at night in his home. And he had this whole profession of this beautiful fantasy art. And I mean, true fanzine people obviously know him, but I want regular comic fans to know him as well.
I feel like CIA agent has to be worked into that title.
I was lucky enough his nephew helped with the estate. And I mentioned my interest in John, and he said, well, next time I visit, you can come up and see his studio. I was like, okay. And so I get a text. I'm heading there this weekend. Coming. I'm heading up. And, one of the goals was to possibly get a painting, and I got 2, and I love them. But when I got to the studio, it was amazing. It was like Raiders of the Lost Ark, piles of stuff. And you had these little, walkways to go through. And everywhere were tape cassettes. And I'm like, mixtapes? That just doesn't make sense. He would record every conversation he had on the phone, which gets back to like CIA, right?
Gets back to something.
And it's like, so I was telling Gary with that, and he's like, and Gary's mind was like, what's on those tapes? Is it something we should like know and publish and put out there in the public? I was like, why didn't I think of that? So I don't know where the tapes are and what are on those tapes. So I need to reach out to Rick.
Yeah,
and I'm making a note right now to do that because
something to do sooner rather than later. That
Yes.
feels like something that people would get rid of. So
I know,
track
right?
those down soon. That could be your manuscript already recorded for you. I was going to ask you about any that got away, and it sounds like
We're segueing into that.
Oh, there's more?
Well, yeah. I mean, you asking that. I think when I announced AdHouse was shutting down, I said there were like 3 projects that would pull me back in. One of them was the John Fantuccio book. And I think the other one would have been Raphael Grandpa art book, because that hasn't happened.
Yeah, I would like that one.
And I have a signed contract that we would do. I went out to Comic-Con. I met him. We went to lunch. He signed a contract. And then he even did a blog post saying, Chris, this drawing will appear in the art book. It's on his blog somewhere.
We really need to
I know, right?
make that happen,
right.
Chris.
If no one's familiar with Grandpa, he's like a Paul Pope from Brazil, like a superstar. And he does amazing work. And he needs an art book. And then the third project, anything you wanted to do, Jim Rugg.
That's sweet. This is where we get a little over sentimental, but we'll try to be tough up here. Chris, I asked you about legacy, and one of the things that I think of with you, because I'm aware of other publishers, like Koyama Press comes to mind. Annie Koyama, I think of her as the patron saint of comics.
She is, 100%.
But I know that you two have gotten close and that you would often talk kind of shop and share what you knew and stuff. And with that in mind, I wonder if other publishers do come to you, seeking that kind of advice and feedback, because I see lots of publishers continuing to pop up. Possibly even a theme lately is that there are a lot of small publishers that have come up in the last 4 to 5 years that I see at shows like CXC. And I wonder if you have advice for artists working with small publishers or publishers themselves in terms of how to run a shop and be responsible to their creators.
I felt like there were a lot of questions there before the questions, but
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Publishers have reached out to me. Radiator Comics does a great job, especially since he's continuing Viewatron with Sam and Peach. Leon at Secret Acres. I love getting feedback from Leon and Annie. I guess, if you are a creator and you're working with a publisher, it's common sense stuff. If they don't get back to you in a timely fashion, if there's not a reason, you have to question them then. It's like if they're not answering emails quickly, how are they handling business in a timely fashion? And then in regards to like small publishers, I don't know what the answer is there. Silver Sprocket, I think, is doing amazing work right now, and I just don't know how they're making it work. It's like their books look fantastic, and like half of them are priced way below what I think they should be priced at. Is that too much information?
No, that's great. I was going to say we need to be asking them
right,
these questions.
I know. And Avi and I, we have a great. It's like I helped him distribute a few of his books through Diamond because that was always a hurdle for small press was how do you get into the main distributor? And so it's called sub-distribution, where I act for them. They go through AdHouse, but it is confusing because then like direct market think, oh, AdHouse publishes. No, we did not publish it. We just helped to get in there. And Fantagraphics used to do the same thing. They might still do that same thing. But you're right. We should be asking Avi. But Silver Sprocket is here. If you haven't checked their stuff out, swing by and check it out. Check out Jim's stuff. Check out my stuff.
So I had made notes on some of my favorite AdHouse publications, and I was wondering if you have Driven by Lemons at your table.
We do. It's out of print. I'm sorry. I am a dealer, I guess, as well as a publisher. So as stuff goes out of print, it will get a little bit more expensive. But I try and keep it in mind. I always felt like I tried to be socialistic. I wanted comics for the masses. I wanted students to be able to afford a book if they wanted to. So I always tried to price stuff a little bit lower. But we do have Driven by Lemons. And Driven by Lemons is, my favorite story about that is if a customer comes up, they don't know Josh, the creator.
Josh Cotter.
They don't know AdHouse, the publisher. But they pick this book up, which is a facsimile of his Moleskine sketchbook. And they look at it, and they buy it. They don't know anything about it. So they're reacting to the book, which is the dream come true, right?
Yes, totally. And I think it summarizes a lot of what I admire about AdHouse Books. To be to recreate his sketchbook, essentially, so it feels like you are holding his sketchbook when you're holding this book. I remember getting hold of that. I did not know what to expect. I didn't know it was coming. He had done a book called Skyscrapers of the Midwest, which AdHouse also published. And so whenever Driven by Lemons came out, it kind of blew my mind. As somebody who also loves print and books and design, I had never seen something like that. And to me, that's one of those things I hold up whenever I talk about AdHouse Books and what I think of as the design values of AdHouse Books. So check that out after this talk, whenever everybody I expect to see lined up at AdHouse's table after this. Definitely one to pick up and give a look to, because it is a unique book like so many of AdHouse Books.
They currently are in plastic bag, but I will bring one out of the plastic bag for you to flip through. And the thing we're talking over is the fact that it is an abstract comic that Josh created while he was dealing with his, I think he thought it was bipolar. And this isn't a secret. He's put this out there. Bipolar problems, but I don't think it was bipolar. He was on medications at the time, and that's even in the comic strip. But he recently talked to me, and he told me he did figure out what it was, but I'm drawing a blank. Autism, I think. Some type of active autism.
Okay.
But now that he knows, he can deal with that without medication. He knows what he needs to do to take care of that, which is awesome.
Yes.
Because I love Josh.
Absolutely, yes. One of the great voices that you found as a publisher, at least one of the voices that you shared with me as a publisher that I found through the work that you published.
And we have to thank Isotope Comics, who gave out the Mini Comic Award for excellence to Josh. I would not have known about Josh's comic if not for that. So thank you, James at Isotope.
Yeah, and we're going to open this up to questions from everybody, but as we kind of summarize AdHouse Books, things like Josh Cotter's work, a new voice that you really brought to everybody, one of the staples of AdHouse, but also you worked with a lot of these, I was trying to kind of like categorize some of the folks that you worked with, because there were a lot of new voices that you published, if not first, at least to a wide audience. But you also worked with longtime pros, people like Stuart Immonen, that a lot of people know from books like X-Men and Superman, very mainstream, but whenever they wanted to do their own books, you were the publisher that they arrived at.
And I honestly do not know how that happened. I seriously, it's like, I remember visiting Stuart at Baltimore Comic-Con and just hanging out. And then the next thing I know, I'm publishing his sketchbook.
Well, publishing one book is kind of that experiment.
Right.
It's the second date that proves you did something right. And you've published several of his books, so I think that's testament to your work as a publisher. Paul Pope, James Jean, Scott Morse, giants, people with massive careers that come to you as a publisher. And so you have this spectrum from new to experienced people, and it makes for a very rich body of work, and I thank you for that. It's certainly enriched my life as a reader and a fan of comics.
Thank you, Jim Rugg, for everything.
With that in mind, I'd like to open this up to some questions from our audience, and I will repeat the question just so we have it on camera. Yes?
So, print on demand has kind of taken over a good chunk of self-publishing and publishing for creators. But from your experience, before that became the ubiquitous way for most people to get at things, what were some of the challenges and triumphs that you've had through finding printers that were able to actually deliver on what you wanted?
All right, I'm going to try to summarize that. Print on demand is something that has become ubiquitous for small print runs today, or quick turnarounds. But over the past 2 decades as a publisher, can you talk about some of your experience working with different printers and what you found to be successful or maybe happy surprises along the way?
Of course. I would suggest always getting at least three quotes from every printer. because you never know what machine they're going to have. You never know what they're going to run it on. You never know what the price is going to be. And make sure it's all inclusive. You want to know what the shipping charges are. Are there any hidden fees? Things like that. But after that, I mean, it's like you're taking a shot in the dark. And one of the things I remember is the Pulpitude Pilgrimage. I don't know if you know this or not, but we printed it, and like the blacks were like 70% gray. And within the story, in the story itself, that was supposed to happen whenever it was a flashback. It was a technique we were using, and you couldn't tell it was happening because the present day wasn't 100% black. So that first book we published had to be reprinted. And so it's like I would go to convention, and I was talking to Tom Devlin about it, and he's like, Chris, every printer's gonna fuck up. And so out of that, it's like, what does the printer do to fix the situation? So for instance, when we did Telstar, the printer messed up again. They never took responsibility. I agree, the file, there's a certain like scene in there, like Zach Soda's story got weird because of the layers of the files got misprinted. You can check it out. But I agree, the files they were given did have problems. It was a hidden layer, but you also printed it that way. And you should at least take some responsibility, and they never did. And I was like, that's it for them. There are more than enough printers out there. So all of that combines with, you know, work local if you can, because you can do a press check. Keep it in the States if you can, USA. Go to Canada next, 2-color. If you need full color, more than likely you have to go to Asia, China, Singapore, and then it's a slow boat. And now, I mean, there's tariffs on top of all that stuff, and paper's gone through the roof. I don't admire what publishers have to deal with in the future. Yay, comics.
Wow. Let's see if we can get a cheerier question
I know, right?
out of the audience.
Well, you actually set me up. So, you mentioned paper. So I've been paying attention to the price hikes. Are they gonna have to revert back? I mean, we're seeing now where it's like $6.99 or such. And I've heard Frank Miller talk about the idea that they should go back to using the old paper stock from like 62. But where's like the middle ground here?
So we are speculating now on the future of paper costs. Paper prices have spiked a lot over the last couple of years, and the question is, what do you see happening in the future in terms of cost of paper and production for books?
It's going to get higher, right? It's inflation. Nothing's going to get cheaper. I wish it would, but I mean, I guess they could try newsprint, but newsprint is more expensive than regular 50-pound offset or whatever offset the printer has that they can pull off the shelf right then and there. If you want newsprint, that's a special order that they got to bring in, higher cost. You would think it would be cheaper because it's poor quality, but that's not the case, at least from what I found.
Also, with newsprint, you are probably going to need to run it through a web press instead of a traditional offset press, which most books are printed on today, which doesn't necessarily add to the cost, but does change the process a little bit.
And what printer can do it?
There's one in Wisconsin. We can talk off mic. Question, yes.
Curious, just how your thinking has evolved over the time in terms of just pricing. Like, it's one of those things where, deciding what to price something, you can kind of probably in hindsight think that was too high or that was too low. How did you kind of figure that out?
Question is, how did you figure out how to price things, books?
Yeah, early on, I think I asked, one of my mentors how they did it. And you get the quote, you figure out, what your print run will be, quantity, and, see what the printer's going to charge you, and then what your cost per unit is. And based on that cost per unit, hopefully you think to add in shipping and all these other things. So what's your cost per book going to be? And you take that, you double it again. That should be retail. That's what I heard. And so then I would take whatever that retail is, go to my shelf, try and find a like book. If it's a hardcover, find a hardcover. It's 124 pages, and see what that's priced at. And then it's like, does it make sense? Is it $17.95? That's the wasteland. You don't want to be between 15 and 20. You'd either bump it to $14.95 or take it to $19.95. But all that said, I found out other publishers would take cost per book double it, double it, double it. And so I was underpricing all along, but it made sense per my goals of being a publisher, of trying to be affordable.
All right, any other questions?
Did you have any insight into that? Have you heard stories like that?
No, but you're double, like there is a formula just based on the layers that go between
Right.
you producing the
Because-
book and you getting it
Right,
into
because
a
you have
retailer.
and that's what young people, I mean, I don't want to say every young person, but a lot of young people don't understand. The retailer needs to make money. And when you become like a real publisher that's dealing with a distributor, they need to make money. That's why all that doubling comes into play. It was because you have middlemen in between you and the consumer.
All right. Yes.
I have an important question. With AdHouse Books out of the picture, who will be publishing the remaining 5 volumes of Duncan the Wonder Dog?
That's a great question. Who will be publishing the remaining volumes of Duncan the Wonder Dog, one of the beloved publications of AdHouse Books?
This is sort of a satirical question, obviously, but the serious question behind it is what becomes of, how does the stuff that you have, is there a way for it to stay in print? Is that going to revert to the authors who can then shop it around? Like what becomes, people like reading this stuff.
Yeah, and I appreciate you setting me up for the answer of me being able to say not it. Because, when Josh, Josh Cotter came up with Not Away, he was like, I'm doing this sci-fi epic. It's going to be 9 volumes. I'm thinking about asking Fantagraphics. Is that okay? I was like, hell yeah. Please ask Fantagraphics. Because I had Duncan on the docket, right? And like in your mind, I'm thinking, is volume 2 ever going to come out? But yeah, we only contract for the printing rights, pretty much. We really don't own anything. AdHouse does not own anything except designs that we did. So I hope Duncan happens, but based on what Adam has been doing now, which is, if you're not familiar with Duncan Wonder Dog, it's a 400-page book, 9 volumes. The dog doesn't appear until the last 3 pages. But it's an amazing world. And real quick, he sent me the PDF. And when it showed up, it was like 11 by 17. And it's a 400-page book, 11 by 17. And I'm like, what are you thinking? And he's like, oh, no, that's wrong. It'll be like 8.5 by 11. I was like, okay. So I read it, and I was like, this guy is smarter than me. He's a genius. This is amazing. This has to come out. And, when we solicited that book, I said, this is the only time I am telling you, buy this book. And people still didn't listen to me. Calvin Reed had to say he was behind it. And Laura Hudson, Comic Foundry.
Wow, yeah.
Deep cut. Did y'all get that? Looking at you, Caitlin. She got behind it, and that helped. And then it started winning awards, and it sold out. We did a 2nd or 3rd printing. But, and now he's into games. He did this really nice game called Oxenfree, right? Yeah, so it's a first-person game, adventure game, choose your adventure, told through the perspective of a teenage girl who is on an island at a party. Right? But it's beautifully illustrated. So he created this game with his cousin. I love that. I'm sure he's making good money there. So why would he come back to comic books? He might. You never know. But yeah, everyone else can take their thing wherever they want to go. I mean, I would imagine, within our silos of teams, like Hartley Lynn of Young Francis fame will work with Drawn and Quarterly next because they both live in Montreal.
Are you breaking news here?
And I would have to imagine Josh will do either Skyscrapers with Fantagraphics or self-publish that, to bring it back in print. Anyone else we should guess about? Where's Aphrodisiac going?
Stay tuned. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Anybody? Yes, Caitlin?
Why comics for you, Chris? Since this is sort of a farewell panel, I would love for you to just talk about what it is about this medium and community that means so much to you.
The question is,
she's
why comics?
She's going to make me cry, right?
Yes. Let's see it.
Man. I don't know. I mean, it's words and pictures. It's beauty. It's an art form that can take you anywhere. It's meeting people. It's becoming best friends with people. Yeah, I mean, it's comics.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris Pitzer and AdHouse Books, for today and for the past 20 years.
Thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you, everyone else.
I love you.
And go check out his table while you can still find these treasures.